turn it into a sentence. Well, you can see some small things with your eyes. With a microscope, however, you can see much smaller details. I think that's the big idea here. I can get rid of some of this. Butterfly, you can see with your eyes. That's just an example, right? So that's not the big idea. And now what I need to do without looking, so I'm going to take the text away from them. Here's the big idea. Can you put it in your own words? And maybe it'll look something like, microscopes let you see things so small that you can't see them with just your eyes. How's that? Acceptable? And so essentially taking kids through that kind of a process, engaging them, that's pretty basic. That's pretty simple. You could do that in a first grade classroom. Certainly could do it in 4th and 5th grade. And obviously, it's not that different with a longer text. It just, it's operationally, it plays out a little differently. I'm going to suggest not just finding the main idea, but trying to create a little bit of a skeleton outline. So essentially, we'll use the subheadings. What are the 2 or 3 big ideas for each subheading, and can you convert those into a summary? Or another way, a lot of people like to use gist. You read the selection, you try to answer the 5 W's and the H about the chapter or whatever, and then you try to write a 20-word summary, and you'll literally limit the kids to 20 words, so they have to come up with the big ideas in that kind of a space. But in any event, that's the idea of doing that kind of writing makes great sense. What's involved in it? You have to comprehend the text. You have to identify the key ideas and details. You have to identify the structure. You have to paraphrase or translate ideas into your own words. You have to combine subpoints into generalizations. Do you notice anything about those 5 points? They're a huge part of your state standards. That if you're getting kids doing these, you're working on a very large percentage of what the state is asking you to teach kids to do. So there's nothing crazy here that I'm suggesting to you. Oh man. We have 10 minutes. And I have one last idea from this part of the presentation. And I'm going to introduce it. I'm going to share some of the ideas, but the really fun parts of it, you're going to have to wait till we come back from lunch. Because I have at least a couple of practical activities in here that I want to demonstrate or take you through. And obviously, I'm not going to do those in 10 minutes. So here's what's going to happen. Let me overview the rest of the day, and then I'll go through these last few slides. One, as I say, I'm just going to walk through this particular idea, get it introduced, get it on the table. We'll break for lunch. You got an hour. When we come back, I want to take you through the activities that are tied to this that are, I think, pretty cool. I hope you'll think so. I'll pull this together. I'm then going to switch out the slides. We're going to switch over to looking at all that stuff I skipped before, but I want to put it in the context of reading with complex text and how that plays out, and how you might do a few things differently there, and tons of practical examples with vocabulary and sentences and cohesion and structure and so on. In fact, we'll use the rest of the time just doing those kinds of activities. So that's what our day is going to look like. And the reason why I want to get into that complex text stuff, 2 reasons. One is you will never, ever get kids reading enough science and social studies in your classrooms if you don't find some ways of guiding them to do that successfully, because those texts are often harder than the reading books. And 2, frankly, in the reading books, we're often teaching kids with books that are too easy. So I'm going to try to twist your arm a little bit to get you working with harder books with the kids and show you how to do that. So that's where we're going the rest of the day. I have made the point, I don't know how many times, that you guys are not responsible for teaching disciplinary literacy per se. That really falls with the more sophisticated, the harder text, the stuff that you guys just don't work with. But the fact is, a bunch of you teach in 3rd and 4th and 5th grade, and a bunch of you are teaching boys and girls who are above grade level. Let's be honest, you've got a pretty terrific group of kids here. You've done a good job with them. And so the question becomes, shouldn't we be, if our texts allow it, shouldn't we be introducing kids to some of these disciplinary ideas, even in the elementary, even if it's not part of our standards, because we want these kids to have as long a line of learning as possible, so when they walk out of our district, these kids really succeed in whatever they want to do? Isn't that really what we want to do? So even though I've made a big deal out of the fact that most of these things that need to be done after they leave, these kids leave you, that doesn't mean that there aren't some of these that you could actually start in the elementary. So to the extent that available texts allow, introduce students to the reading routines and special text characteristics of the disciplines. And what I'm going to show you is, this is a technique, this is based on a fifth grade social studies textbook. And we'll take a look at this activity. This is something that I developed. And earlier I talked about the idea of teaching kids theme and literature, which is a very disciplinary idea. You don't have theme in other subject matters. You have it in literature. That's where it fits. Actually, how do you teach kids to do that? I've got that in there. Why did I develop these? And I can tell you, neither of these got developed out of my research. For example, this first thing came because I had been invited to do a literacy instruction demonstration at a suburban school district in the Chicago area. And they wanted me to come in and teach disciplinary literacy to fifth graders as a demonstration to a group of teachers. And they faxed me the night before the lessons. They faxed me the chapter that I was going to be working with. And it's this chapter that I have here. I've actually got the whole thing typed up. In the pages that they faxed me, it was like 26 or 27 pages long. So it was a fairly long chapter. Later on, I typed it up because I wanted to use it with groups like you. And this is the entire chapter. It fits on a little less than 2 pages, you know, if you had it typed and not on slides like this. So it's not a very extensive text, but it's actually a week of social studies work in this particular program, which is sad, I think. That's not very much reading. They faxed this thing to me, and they faxed the kids' copy, not the teacher's guide. And I looked at it, and I love American history, but I couldn't understand the text. I was lost in it. I couldn't figure out what I would do the next day to teach these kids anything about disciplinary literacy. And in fact, I even thought of cheating and doing more of a content-ary reading thing. Boys and girls, good readers, when they read, ask themselves questions. And so what we're going to do today is I'm not going to have you reading just for the information. I want you to read, and you're going to come up with the questions. And when you ask a question, I will make sure you get an answer to your question. Nothing very disciplinary about that. It certainly gets you to think about the material more than once, so it's not a bad thing to do. But it's not disciplinary. It's not anything about, historians don't read that way. So why would I be teaching kids to try to do that at this stage? And so I tried to come up with something, and it turned out I came up with something pretty good. It's been used in a number of studies that other people have done. I used it to get through a lesson with a group of fifth graders because that's what my situation was as a teacher. But it's turned out that this thing is quite useful. It's being taught in high schools and colleges around the country. There are at least a couple of research studies that show that it actually helps kids to do something quite important with history reading. And so we're going to look at that because I created it for fifth grade. Why couldn't we use it in fourth and fifth grade, especially in a district like this one? And the second one is another one of my kids' stories. I developed this particular item, simply because my daughter needed some help with something she was doing in school, and it turned into not just a how do you help your kid with their homework, but I came up with a way of teaching a theme that actually works and that a lot of people are finding to be quite useful. And so I'm going to show you how to do both of those, because I think both of those could fit in elementary classrooms as a precursor to what needs to come beyond that. And then we're going to shift over to complex text. So we've got a lot of work to do and only about 2 hours. So if you'll be back at 12:30, we would really appreciate it. We'll start right on time.
The custodians are going to clean the tables and chairs when you're gone, so please take your belongings. Thanks.
Are we down in that same hallway we were before?
Is that your own private table? Yeah, you don't have to worry about it. Thank you. Sure? I'm sure.